Okay, that's great. We are, right now we're starting. Okay, let's start. Okay, thank you all for being here. I'm a little bit off balance. My computer just kept breaking down, but I'm connected now. Our process is people just share. Anything you want to say is fine. James will keep track of our time with his magic 2-minute egg timer. And I think we tend to start out with people briefly saying, very briefly, who they are. So I'm Jim Stoner from Fordham. James?
And I'm just going to say one thing, that in the past, the digital hand just seemed unnecessary because we're such a small group. So if you're interested in contributing, just raise a hand, and then Professor Stoner will lead in one by one. My name's James Weikert. I am a former student of Fordham University's business department. I am in the process of setting up for a PhD, and I'm the project manager of Global Movement Network.
Great, thank you. Anjali?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am a MS student in global finance at Gabelli School of Business and a machine learning intern at IKEA. Alongside my degree in business management, I have 3 years of experience in development economics. With respect to the Global Movement Network, I am the lead developer and manager of Global Movement Network's website. I have a penchant for environment, technology, and finance.
Thank you. Donna?
Hi, everyone. I'm Donna Rapaccioli. I am an accounting professor as my discipline, and I have the privilege of serving as the dean of the Gabelli School of Business. And I've been involved in a number of different ways in primarily trying to change the curriculum and also to build partnerships with large companies to ensure that the curriculum is changed, but also on the other end that there are jobs for the students.
Thank you. Erica?
Hi, I'm Erica Steckler from UMass Lowell. I'm also a co-director of the Donahue Center for Business Ethics and Social Responsibility in the Manning School of Business at UMass Lowell. And I am one of the organizational leaders, at least for the U.S. Humanistic Management Association, where dignity and well-being is central. And my work has focused around areas of sustainability and corporate responsibility, and the interplay of dignity and well-being and social innovation, wisdom, all sorts of things. So,
thank you. Morgane?
Hi, everybody. My name is Morgane Fritz. I'm from La Rochelle Business School in France, and I'm associate professor in sustainable supply chain management. So this is my core area, but also I do research and teaching in corporate social responsibility, business ethics, and sustainable procurement. And I joined the Global Movement Network to support the team, and I especially focus on developing some research areas on the topic of sustainability teaching in higher education.
Thank you. Leslie?
Last but not least, my name is Leslie Bellsberg. I'm a graduate of Fordham's Business School as well, many years ago. I am the Executive Vice President of Production for Imagine Entertainment here in Los Angeles, with oversight across all production-related projects that they do in-house and with others. And I'm very happy to be here.
Frank? Thank you, Leslie. Frank?
Just introducing ourselves. Okay, I'm Frank Werner. I am Associate Professor of Finance at Fordham University, colleague of Donna and of Jim. And I have been teaching finance and sustainability now for coming on 15 years. And climate change is a particularly important part of that conversation. So it appears in my classes. I've also done some writing and research with Jim, including a textbook that we wrote called Financial Managing for a Sustainable World, which is the first textbook that we know of that incorporates sustainability, climate change type of issues directly into an introductory finance course. I've been working very hard to put that into Fordham's introductory finance courses as well. And Jim and I have done some other research and writing about sustainability, which includes climate change.
Thank you, Frank. Let me say two things. Andy Hoffman is scheduled for the meeting, and I presume he'll show up shortly. This is a very unusual session of the 6 because it's really heavily loaded with Fordham folks. And that's just the way acceptance has occurred. Some of them have like 0 or 1 Fordham folk in it, but we're lucky that Fordham is doing so much great stuff that in addition to what your own schools are doing and what you know about through like the International Humanistic Management Network that Erica's involved in, and what's going on in France and Europe, et cetera. We have lots to talk about. And I will now try and be quiet and let James turn over the 2-minute egg timer for whoever talks next. We have an hour.
I have a question.
Great.
One of my questions, because this is not my world, sustainability and climate change, although we deal with it on a daily basis in terms of trying to remain as green as we possibly can in film production and television production. But I'd love to be educated more on the approach and the perspectives of many of you on global sustainability, because it does impact us in the future.
Thank you.
I guess I'll start. So, I really became aware of all of the challenges with climate and around business education more when I became the dean of the school. So it's quite interesting. As a faculty member, it wasn't on my radar. And when I attended a conference, there was a presentation by somebody from the UN Prime, Principles for Responsible Management Education. And it was at the very beginning of their journey. And it was just like a light switch that went on how all of this connected to Jesuit education. So for me, a lot of my thinking is grounded, Leslie, in the Sustainable Development Goals and how we can advance Sustainable Development Goals and what role can business education play. So, I've personally been very focused on the curriculum because, I think projects are important and clubs are important, but unless it's embedded in the required curriculum, core courses at the undergrad level and the MBA level, I think it's going to get lost. Again, electives are important, but I want to make sure that every student that goes to the Gabelli School has not only an awareness, but a knowledge of, what the issues are and really wants to be part of the solution. So for me, I'm very focused on curriculum, as I said, and really the other piece of that is connecting it to the corporate world and to ensure that our students can hit the ground running. And thank God that ESG has become so important to companies that it's getting easier and easier to connect these dots. But, my support was the Sustainable Development Goals and the UN originally, Leslie.
Unknown caller.
Ooh. That was fun. Thank you.
I can go ahead next, if that's okay. So I want to throw some questions to the panelists here because I am a student, current student. My introduction to climate change came, I think, maybe 10 years back something, because I used to watch a lot of documentaries. And then I think in 2013 or something, I came across this documentary called Cowspiracy. And it shed the kind of figures that it discussed and the things it talked about. After watching all those things and reading UN SDGs goal, all those stuff, I ended up becoming a vegan. And I did it for 4 years because I thought that is the thing that I can do effectively and instantly. And at this present role, I kind of, as a student, I want to know what are the avenues that I have, because individually I can make certain changes and choices. But if I want to make a major impact in terms of environment, what are the things that I can do? I got lucky because I met Professor James Stoner in one of the event in Fordham. It was UN Sustainable Goal event, and I happened to talk to him. And that is how I got in touch with him, and we are working on Global Movement Network. But I want to know more from your perspective what I can do to take these climate change goal further.
I do have to say very quickly, I'm not going to answer your question directly, but I could say very quickly that Anjali joined this initiative we're involved in. And without James and Anjali, we wouldn't be anywhere near here at all. It wouldn't have happened. She's done a terrific job when things I have no competence at all in associated with social media and all that stuff on the website. So thanks a lot, Anjali. See if somebody else wants to address your question.
I'll take a quick cut at it. What I've discovered in my years of teaching sustainability and finance, which is the direction that I come at it from, is that while things are changing now, as Donna mentioned, it's becoming easier and easier to talk ESG and to find companies that are hiring people to do sustainability related jobs. My experience is that the single best thing that a student can do is become very solidly grounded in their discipline, finance, accounting, whatever, and layer on top of that as much as possible through your education, courses that you take, through any extracurricular activities and clubs, layer on top of that a very solid insight into sustainability, climate change, food security issues, whatever angle of sustainability that you're interested in. Then you're going to become a very attractive person for a company who is hiring someone, primarily to do a job that they're very familiar with, finance, accounting, and so on. But you have the ability to bring so much more to that job because of your sustainability knowledge and experience and so on. So that would be my guidance for you. And that's the guidance I generally give to my students. I think over time, it's going to become, as Donna says, much easier to walk into a company and say, I'm an ESG expert, hire me based on that. I don't think we're there yet.
And I can just respond quickly to Anjali, and then I think I can get a little bit back to Leslie's question. So one of the things, the value of sustainability initiatives of organizations, whether it's, private industry, multinationals, government, is scale, right? So, and one of the things you can do right away is do some exploration, get curious about best practices in organizations. And just a very specific recommendation, look at the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, look at the organizations that are top on that list, go to their websites, look at their sustainability pages, and you'll spend hours, days, weeks, months, years, but you'll see how they are monitoring their own sustainability. And that is anything from the very top organizational level, stakeholders, supplier networks, all the way down to the individual employees and what's expected of them. So that's a quick response for you if you want to dig in there a little bit more. Leslie, to get sort of to your question, one of the areas that I've been looking a little bit more intensively into recently are the SDGs. And I'm just struck by what a wealth of resource or set of resources that is. If you go to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals site, and you start looking at the individual targets within each of those 17 sustainability goals, you really get a nice flavor and actionable set of practices that any organization can start thinking about what relates to them. I think one of the things that organizations are doing right now, business industry, is sort of picking the not comprehensive set of SDGs to kind of get aligned with, although I think that's coming, but to start with kind of what's sort of in their sweet spot, in their competitive advantage, where can they make the most impact? So you're in a very different specialized industry or business, it sounds like. So, it might be worth your time to look at the SDGs and really begin to understand, like, where can we as a company make the most impact in each of these areas? So I think that's a good start.
The only thing I'll add, Anjali, is understanding the policies, because if you want to make real change, then you have to understand what are the policies and how do they impact the company. And, it relates to what Erica was saying. So maybe pick an issue that you're really passionate about, understand the policies, see how they impact the industry.
Let me take it from a couple angles, Anjali. One is things you can do in your career as things move along and you get more and more influential in an organization, et cetera. The other thing is what you can do right now, this moment. And you are doing stuff right now at this moment. You're involved in an initiative whose intention is to transform business education right now, not in 20 or 30 years, but right now. And I think about what Greta Thunberg has done and is doing. And I think about what a lot of young people are doing right now. I'm sure that Leslie will be involved in movie projects that'll have a lot to do with this. And every place we look, there's immediate things that can be done right now. Everybody on this call right now, including Andy, who's not on the call right now, is doing stuff right now to have an impact right now. And so I'm excited about every time I turn around, I see something can be done today, tomorrow, right now to make a difference. Morgane? You're muted right now, but you look like you're about to speak.
Yeah, I am indeed. Yeah, a bit of a different question. At our school in La Rochelle, we are thinking of training our teachers in any kind of course like marketing, finance, or else on integrating sustainability in their courses. And I was wondering if among some of you, you have any experience with that, any recommendation to approach these people that are maybe not necessarily interested or do not know how they can integrate sustainability targets in their courses.
Donna, do you want to say anything about the both the RFP and about the Jesuit Network initiative, which I think other schools that aren't Jesuit schools would be welcome to be involved in?
Sure. To answer your question directly, my experience is you have to make it very practical and make the business case for it and explain to the faculty members why it's important for their students to really master this, because this is what the market is demanding. And I think if you make that case, you will convince many, not all, but you will convince many of its importance. And then, you know, when you do the training or the education, make sure that it's really good, because your first shot is potentially your last shot. And if you don't do a really good job pulling people in, then the next time they're not gonna come. But another angle that Jim wanted, I think, me to speak about is incentivizing faculty that are already doing this to create courses and curriculum and modules that others who are interested but are not as knowledgeable yet can use. So, you know, I'm leading a project with the Jesuit Network, which is really about redesigning the curriculum. Really the core curriculum. And right now we've issued an RFP for faculty who are willing to develop modules that are discipline specific around the Sustainable Development Goals that someone else could use to tee up a conversation or to spark curiosity in their students. So, you know, the idea is to incentivize those that are already quote unquote believers and develop really strong content that can be easily shared. Because I think, you know, when you make the case, most people are on board. There's going to be some that are just going to shut down. But from my view, you just can't worry about them. You have to worry about the majority. And I think the majority want to do this. They're apprehensive because they don't know how. And if we make it easy, they're more likely to do it and then to want to do more.
I think there's been a sea change in the last 12 months or so. And I think that Jesuit initiative is part of this sea change in creating it. What we're teaching in the core courses in business school is really fairly appropriate for the realities and the fictions of the 19th and 20th century, but it's not very consistent with the realities of the 21st century. And I think that what we're starting to hear people say is that it's hard to defend what we used to teach, and we have to teach new stuff. And that new stuff is the realities of the 21st century right now. And so it's a shift away from, oh my gosh, I've got to do something new and it's risky and I don't know how to do it and nobody else is doing it, to holy cow, this train is pulling out of the station and I'm not on it. And a lot of schools, with a lot of leadership from Jesuit and other schools also, are really transforming their curriculum and their research. And now I have people I can follow. And if I don't move, I'm going to be left behind. So I'm not so much a pioneer, but I'm playing catch up ball if I'm not careful. Does that make any sense, Frank? I think it really fits well with what you and I have been doing.
Yeah, I think it does very much so. I would add a couple of things to that. One is that Jim has a couple of times now mentioned the work of the Jesuit Network, and this is in parallel to the RFP that Donna was talking about. I'm involved with a group of Jesuit finance professors from around the world. We're working obviously with Zoom and so on, and we're developing an introductory finance course. And I know that there are parallel courses being developed in accounting and marketing and so on. And it's intended to be fully asynchronous and to go live summer of 2021, so it could be used in the fall. And this is going to be very focused on an introduction to finance, in our case, grounded in sustainability issues. So my particular unit of it is just 2 weeks. And I am working to create that asynchronous content, which is all new to me, but the asynchronous part of it, not the content. But there are going to be resources there, hopefully by next fall 2021, that anyone who's not an expert in this can use. And even if they don't teach from that, they can just listen to it and say, well, here is how someone who's grounded in this would teach it. The other thing to comment on is Donna, is the ground floor course and how that has evolved. About 10 years ago, we started at Fordham a course that we playfully called the ground floor. It's a freshman course, Introduction to Business. And back then it reflected what the teaching was at that time, which was the teaching that Jim just referred to as the 19th, 20th century world. And over the last couple of years, Donna has been working with the faculty that are teaching that course to embed sustainability in the projects, in the topics. There are a lot of faculty who come into that course to lecture for one class about their discipline. She's choosing those faculty members as the ones that have more expertise in this area, more likely to talk about that. And what we're seeing, therefore, is a student-led demand for this. And the more your students come up saying, but you haven't said anything about climate change, you haven't said anything about global warming, you haven't said anything about sustainability, the SDGs, why am I not hearing that in your course? That drives change dramatically. It's demand-driven change as opposed to supply-driven change. But that's a dramatic change, and it's been a significant help at the Gabelli School at Fordham in terms of getting people on board.
I have a curiosity, since it's been many years since I've been at business school, but I'm curious to know whether the use of social media, Anjali, going back to your point and moving forward, and given that that's my world, has been utilized at all as a means of attracting a different kind of student to the Gabelli School now that you have this impactful sustainability approach. Because I think a lot of young people who think of business school don't necessarily think about it in that way. They think about dry finance, management, et cetera. And my question would be, has there been a vehicle for you to be able to expose, I guess, this kind of sustainability in practices inside the school as a means of attracting a different kind of student? Because there's a whole group of kids and a whole group of adults who are very compelled by sustainability and the whole issue of global warming and what to do, but I'm not sure they ever think about it from the business side. And I'm just curious to know whether or not there's been an impact at the school or you've thought about that approach.
Are you asking me? Yes. So
Anybody.
I think at the MBA level, there has been a dramatic shift in who we enroll. And, you know, I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, we developed a new way of, you know, marketing the school, which was really something we always did, but we were never as intentional. And everything was about business with purpose. And it has totally changed the MBA and the undergraduate. I think at the MS level, we're trying to move in that direction, but it's a little harder because those degrees are very, very focused. And I think a lot of the people that enroll because they really want to learn finance, or they really want to learn all about accounting. So it's taking a little more time, but we are developing tracks, especially in accounting, around sustainable accounting practices. So the answer is it's in progress, but I personally see some movement. But I'd be interested in Anjali's response as a student.
I like that question because it brings up so many thought process for me. Because when I decided to join Fordham, I kind of knew like finance was my weakest area. So I thought, why not do masters in finance? And everything revolves around money. So I thought if I can learn finance, then I will be able to attack whatever field I want to attack, be it climate, be it some social changes through money, because money is revolving everything. So right now, my focus is obviously on learning finance, but since Fordham does offer some of the courses, like there is one particular course of Warden, which teaches how you can make ESG specific portfolios. And these are the courses that kind of inspire us and push us towards taking and thinking out of line. But my issue is when I'm reading about finance per se, then I get so lost into it that I cannot think about how can I relate finance with climate, because these are like two different things in my mind, and it is sometimes difficult to bridge those gaps until and unless you have done extensive research on those fields.
Anjali, you need to take my sustainability and finance.
Yes, but you said in summer next year, I'll be done by 2021, like next year. Well,
Okay, lástima.
Yep.
Also read some of the annual reports, like even, you know, big banks like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, they have whole sections in their annual reports around carbon and ESG. So sometimes if you pick a few companies and just read their annual report, it'll come to life for you.
Okay.
This comment isn't particularly addressed to Anjali as a student, but addressed to everybody. One of the things that started happening at Fordham as we started getting more and more aware of sustainability and ESG and so on, is that several faculty members started independently becoming leaders in connecting with resources. And what comes to mind particularly is the work that Barbara Porso has done in terms of the outreach to the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, so that we're now connected to them. We have student internship opportunities with them. They actually do their annual meetings now at Fordham Lincoln Center. She teaches a course on sustainability accounting, and this all developed out of faculty members who decided to run with it, you know, take it as you know, and make something of it. So for those of you on the faculty side, one way to do this is to find those people and encourage them to make those connections and maybe help them make those connections.
Erica, do you want to say something about the International Humanistic Management Network that you've been so involved in for so long?
Sure. You know, sustainability is, I would say, a very important thread in what the International Humanistic Management Association is thinking about and facilitating conversations around. The Humanistic Management association also has a, what is it called? I'm going to lose the name of it right now on the spot, but it's a UN working group. So, which, to be honest, I'm not sure that we as an association have leveraged optimally. That's sort of an area for future improvement. And actually that's something I'd love just to pick Leslie's brain about a little bit, because social media platforms are not a personal strength of mine, and they haven't totally been an organizational strength of any of the groups that I've been part of, although we're working on developing it. It's also hard when you're primarily a volunteer organization and you need some resources around that and administration. But the Humanistic Management Association does really work hard to keep the idea of sustainability, particularly as it relates to dignity, but also planetary well-being and flourishing, on the agenda. And we do that by offering conversations for people to attend as often as we can, highlighting speakers who bridge industry and academia often. We are also part of, we have a centers consortium. The Humanistic Management Association has a centers consortium. I think it's currently 8 centers globally that are trying to kind of drive the agenda, including sustainability, and support each other. So, you know, having a support network is key in this. Also, this is not necessarily Humanistic Management Association related, but to get back to Morgane's question, and I know this resonates with Donna, UN Prime, I think, is just a key leverage point. Oh, did I run out of time? Sorry about that. I'll wrap up. So I know our organization is just at the beginning, like we're actually applying to be a UN Prime signatory. It's a symbolic financial commitment, but the key is there's commitment there organizationally and institutionally, and a lot of support. And then we also have accreditation demand. So our accrediting institute, ACSB, wants more sustainability. So that's also a sort of push institutionally for us to move in a more sustainable direction.
Thank you. Morgane, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what's happening in Europe?
You mean regarding sustainability teaching?
And the work you're involved in with your school and elsewhere.
I can talk about my school. So indeed, we were signatory of the UN PRME as well. And we have some learning goals in all our syllabuses and our curriculum. And some of them are directly related to sustainability and especially to business ethics. So this is one thing that we do. And well, recently the whole school officially announced this repositioning regarding sustainability teaching, with the willingness to be a role model for business schools in this area. And what you explained, Donna, also regarding the ground floor program, the ground floor courses, this is something that we have done as well. So the idea is that any student that enters the business school will follow a lecture on what is CSR, what is sustainability, what is business ethics as an introduction, and will deepen this knowledge little by little all along his training. And yeah, the idea is that, of course, when the student finishes his study, that he knows more about it and can master this. What we do as well is we have a Master of Science that is specialized in sustainability management, where then students that are really want to be a sustainability manager one day, well, they have then all their lectures that are aligned with the SDGs, business ethics, etc. And they learn specific tools. And we are now also revising the content of this program so that it's aligned, as you said, James, to the need of today, because they need some tools, but they also need to be trained on how to develop new tools, because the tools we have, like carbon footprint, etc., maybe they will change in the future. So this is what we try to do with those students more specifically.
Thank you. Yeah, Anjali.
So I want to throw another question. How do you move towards a sustainable world when it affects the general population's personal preferences in certain ways? For example, animal husbandry as a sector overall contributes to global warming in much larger contribution percentage-wise when we compare it to the total transport sector altogether. I think it was somewhere around 40 to 40% around the world, because it takes into account the amount of water that it takes, the land, and obviously the manure and the CO2 contribution directly. But so I'm kind of hinting towards red meat, and because in the animal husbandry sector, red meat contributes to the highest amount of climate and global warming overall. So how can you attack those points when companies will not change their policies when it comes to those stuff, and people would not like to move from red meat to say chicken or something which is not harming the climate in a bigger way?
This is not an easy question. You ask such tough questions. But, I think when you want to change behavior, you have to create incentives, right? And you also have to create alternatives. There's a great podcast that highlights Coors beer. And they were trying to, really combat drinking and driving. And, they talked about all the things that they did. They created a non-alcoholic beer. They had events in bars that had a designated driver. And if you were the designated driver, you were able to get free nachos, and you could share your nachos with your friends. And they tried all of these different things, some of which were quite successful. And, I know when I was growing up, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but it wasn't a thing. Like, you didn't worry about drinking and driving. It just wasn't on your radar. And now over the years, I mean, I have grown children, and it's like a big thing. And, you knew they were going to have a big drinking night when the taxis were out in the front, because, no one was going to think about driving. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying that it has to be a multifaceted approach that provides alternatives. And we've seen that, right, with the plant-based hamburgers, but also provides incentives. And I don't know what those incentives might be, but, tough question.
Well, I can take a stab at this from the media standpoint, and I think what we've seen a lot of is the as you've said, Donna, the idea that people are looking at alternatives because it's become more viable, but it's also become much more available in the media, and people start to learn more about these things. What I don't know is what the subsidies are for farmers when it comes to red meat and animals, and the various versions of financial gain or loss based on that. It's not my world, so I can't really speak to it, but I'd be curious, because I think that's the other area that one has to look at. Plus, you have to look at where in the world people survive based on red meat. But I do think that there are many forms of marketing and media, some good, some bad, that might be useful in trying to educate the population about the impact. And I know in California, which is not a perfect example of the rest of the world, because people here tend to be much more, what what's the term? I guess they're somewhat isolated in terms of how they approach sustainability, and they're probably more conscious because of the oceans, et cetera, that I'm not living in a world like where I grew up in Alberta, where red meat and oil and gas are the two things that keep this province rolling. And the question has been, for me, what places like that are doing to counteract those sorts of things, and what kind of work is being done media-wise to try and educate people, because you're basically taking away their livelihood. So you have to replace it with something else. And that's really the question for me, is what you do in a case like that, because we have to educate a population to think entirely differently. The only way that's going to happen is through movements and through media and through education, but not fake news. So I think that that's the challenge ahead, is to try and figure out a way of utilizing the media and education as a means of reaching people in a way that we're not reaching them yet. And if we are, it's more reactionary. It's not mainstream. So the question is, how do you make it more mainstream? I think that's really, for me, the biggest question, is how does that become part of what everybody's thinking is, just as a natural instinct?
You know, Roger Sorkin, who teaches at Fordham a little bit of his time, was on the session last week. And he's been doing some exciting stuff in that area. And I didn't know what he was doing until very recently. So I think the media thing, Leslie, is really a great opportunity for us. Let me say one more thing. Those of us who are, some of us are very much committed to three things that we think have to be done, and that business schools are starting to play a major role here. One is we have to deal with climate change. We don't deal with climate change, the game is over. We got to deal with it very quickly. Second thing is we have to become the kinds of people who can live on this planet without destroying it. And that's both the discovery of what it means to be that kind of person, and then making it happen, causing us to be that kind of person. And the third one is we have to discover how we can produce, distribute, and consume the things we need to survive on this planet, and hopefully flourish on this planet. We've got to figure out what that looks like and how to bring it about. For some of us, the enormously exciting thing about business schools is those are probably the best place to answer those last two questions and to make a major contribution to the first one, the climate change issue. But if we're going to figure out how to do this and make it come about, that's what we can do in business schools. And we can start doing it right now. And we're starting to do it right now. And now let's see how, I'll come back to you over the next few weeks or so and ask you more about the media myself. And by the way, this session gets posted. It'll be available on YouTube, and it's available on globalmovement.net. So everything we say is potentially stimulating to other people. So thank you. For me, it's selfish. I haven't seen Leslie for a while, and I haven't visited her for a while, and it's so great to see you.
I feel somewhat intimidated by this esteemed group. My world is very different than yours.
Well, we're bringing them together, though.
To me, that's what I think needs to happen next, is a collaboration that even inside of education doesn't necessarily happen. And we find this as well, even in my working environment, where people don't talk to each other. And that seems to be the first piece of business in my mind, that sustainability, once people start talking about it, it becomes a different conversation than reading about it or being part of a group, but rather making it part of everyday conversation. I don't know, perhaps in your groups that's the case because you're living it. In my groups, I don't know that we necessarily discuss sustainability in the same way that you would. And it's an interesting thing for me to take back to the people that I engage with on a daily basis, because this is helpful, for sure.
So one of the things I wanted to add, because it's something that I was actually inspired by probably at least now a few summers ago in a session that Jim had attended at one of the Academy of Management meetings that we often intersect at. Just this idea, and I think Jim is the one who raised this kind of phrase, this idea of moonshots, right? Balancing this big vision for accomplishing necessary change and the incremental steps that everybody needs to be taking to get there. I mean, I think that's one tension that I'm actually fascinated by. And then to intersect a bit with social media, just having children and being aware of this idea of influencers, right? Who are our influencers, right, for sustainability? Who's going to really get out in front and motivate the type of changes that people, individuals, hundreds, thousands, millions can be making on a daily basis, and also continuing to generate and build toward that aspirational moonshot change. So I just think that's a fascinating area and something I'm chipping away at the edges at.
One thing that has bubbled up quite spontaneously in these dialogues is that sometimes people come up with articles that they would like to share with people. I will send you all a copy of an article that Jeff Sachs, who will be teaching a breakthrough course in economics with Tony Annette next spring in February, wrote just a couple days ago about mission sustainability, which is arguing very much along the lines of we need to make a moonshot. I think I might even use that phrase in this domain. I'll send it to everybody. You might find it kind of fun to look at.
I suspect you're all aware there is the Moonshot Competition that is sponsored by, I mean, and it's really what it's all about. It's quite exciting. And one of the things that the Jesuit Network is trying to do is create an organized approach to the Moonshot Competition and to get universities, high schools, and even elementary schools around the world aligned around submitting some moonshot projects to that competition. So it's pretty exciting.
I was just thinking, sorry, Jim. I was just
Go ahead,
thinking,
Leslie.
what we need in the sustainability world is the same thing that Maria Kondo did on Netflix with regard to cleaning your house. We need two or three major influencers like her to start talking about sustainability on all levels at that level of media, so that it impacts people in a very practical way. Because in terms of global thinking, I'm very respectful of all the people that think about sustainability in a global way, but it's not like, okay, this is what you have to do in your house in order to be sustainable. This is what you do with regard to your car when you need to be sustainable. You know, don't use paper, do everything electronically. All these things are issues that are immediate and may not change the world, you know, dramatically, but on a global level, but it does impact eventually if everybody took that on. And I think that's the next step, is to try and find those influencers who are photogenic enough and have a great idea to be able to make a difference in the world.
Right. I always think of Leonardo DiCaprio when I think of people doing exciting stuff. I don't know if he's as great as he looks like from the outside, but from the outside, it looks like he's a terrific human being.
Yep.
And well, if it's quiet again, just before the meeting started, we followed up an idea that James and Anjali and others and Morgane and I have been thinking about very recently, is that we might do some dialogues next year, early next year, that involve purely young people, just young people talking the same way we're talking. And we thought that one way we might move forward on that is simply, we invited 70 people to do these dialogues with us. And the number of acceptances, I haven't calculated, it must be about 80 to 70% or so. And a few people had conflicts, like Donna had a conflict and she had to come to a different session because of her schedule. And thank you for doing that. So we thought we might send out a message to those folks and simply say, who would you recommend as a young person who might be in such a dialogue? I think it could be really fun to listen to see what they have to say. And young people like elementary school and high school and everything, doesn't have to be even undergraduates.
Thinking of young people and tying that into what Leslie said about photogenic explainers on a reachable level. Given the way that social media is now, and I'm too old to know anything about it other than it's there. But there's so many YouTube channels, there's so many people who set up their own little channel and then get an awful lot of views from that. There's no reason why we have to wait for a traditional mainstream media outlet to move in that direction. We don't need the main networks, for example. We don't need the main cable channels. If we had a project going on somewhere, and I'm certainly not volunteering for it because, as I say, I don't know anything about it and my plate is somewhat full at the moment. But besides that, this may be a great project for some of our students to start putting together some 2 or 3 minute videos in which they're showing you something about how they're using sustainability that might very much reach their peer group. And so that might be an interesting project, Jim, for our student teams and so on here at Fordham.
Good, great idea. Thank you. Great. We have about 8 minutes left before we're all done. And you have to go before it. Okay, thanks for joining us. We won't run over anyway, so you only missed the last 7 minutes of that in due course. This will be, of course, posted on YouTube, etc. Final wrap-up comments?
I guess one comment I'd like to make, we just have so much to learn. So that's what's exciting to me about these conversations. We have much to learn from different generations who are part of the sustainability journey. We have much to learn from different locales who are doing or thinking about sustainability differently. Unfortunately, the United States, I think, is far, far, far behind. And we have a ton of catching up to do. But there's just so many good things happening out there. And I think opportunities to showcase those types of excellent initiatives are a wonderful opportunity for moving the agenda forward. So, and I'm always excited to hear what people are up to and how you're doing better and more effective work around this. So,
I'll tell you a little selfish benefit that comes from what we're doing. Whenever I'm traveling and I talk to, in the old days when I used to travel on airplanes and stuff like that, and I would mention when people ask me what I do, I'd say I teach a business school about sustainability. I then get into the most amazing, wonderful conversations with whomever I'm talking with about that topic. I get invited to places in California to stay with people because their community is very sustainably oriented. People give me references and stuff. It is just such a joy to be involved in this initiative. And I meet such fascinating people. I have so much fun. It's a great job.
I'd like to also add, I'm most appreciative for listening to this conversation today for 2 reasons. One is I'm only regretful that more sustainability conversations didn't happen when I went to business school. I feel like I need to return and audit all the classes I used to take just so that I could understand exactly what it all means as it relates to business today, because this was not a conversation that was taking place 20 years ago. And I'm super grateful for that. And I think that does tell us a lot about how education and how people are starting to think in the world, even in the granular ways of looking at it in the accounting or finance areas, which is not an area that would have ever occurred to me when I was going to business school and dealing with that. So I'm super grateful for that. And I think that if I were to look at that, I could say that there's hope that this will continue and become much more a priority across all disciplines. Because if it's impacting business school, it's impacting every other discipline as well. So that I'm really optimistic about.
Well, business schools used to do the work of the devil, as his people have said, and now we're starting to do the work of the angels. Leslie,
Okay.
I think we talked about something. I think it's going to happen very soon. I think there's going to be a course that may be free on the internet, because we're doing wonderful stuff with Zoom right now.
Yeah.
We weren't doing a year ago. That would be like a rework of your MBA degree in one term. That a session on what we're now teaching in finance that's very different from what you learned, and what we're now teaching in accounting that's very different. And the exciting area is marketing. How in the world we're going to redo marketing is exciting. And the accounting stuff, Fordham's way ahead. We got good stuff there. And then we have this course with Tony and Jeff Sachs on economics that I think we could put together, and I think we'll put together very soon. Maybe a 12-session free program, an hour or two of, this is what we taught you 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and this is what we're now teaching the students.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a lot of fun to do.
I think that would be
now it's going to be easy to do, I think.
fantastic idea. I think also it will create and open up dialogues between different generations, which I think is part of what we need to do here in order to be able to make a collaboration where all people are moving in the same direction.
That's great. Thank you. Last thoughts, anybody? I talk more than I usually do in these meetings, more than I usually do in these meetings. I'll correct that. I understand.
I can go ahead. I had so many amazing takeaways that, and obviously, as Erica said, it's an ocean of knowledge and we kind of have to restrict ourselves. So I'll try and restrict myself, but still go as deep as I can and look at the annual reports, as Donna mentioned, and then do more research in these fields. And maybe I love what Leslie suggested, like making it that viral trending thing for social media. Why can't climate related stuff be viral? Every person will be doing something crazy for climate thing. It will be such an amazing thing overall, and we'll be doing something together faster for the world.
And if anybody has any ideas about what I should do before January 5th, besides send money to Georgia, let me know. I'm very tempted to go down there, but I don't know if I can make any difference by going. But the great thing about the sustainability issue, it shows up absolutely everywhere. Culture, politics, school, daily life, everything. Generational differences, everything. Fun area. Okay, it's time for us to say thank you to everybody. We'll post the location of the recording of this session. I will send out that one article, and if you all come up with anything you want us to send out, send it to me, and I'll pass it on to everybody else. So James, thanks so much for. James is going to one of these days tell us about his doctoral program. It's going to be moving into shortly, and I can. Okay. Bye, everybody.